So the biggest thing was the ad blocker. Bless you. Everyone was blown away by how ad blocking works and the whole networking tab, right? Which is good. Huh. Was that? Yeah. From the ad blocker, right? Yeah, a lot of sites now, they'll actually detect it. They'll detect if you have ad blocking enabled. It's usually there's some sort of script that tries to run and like send something back to the web server, and if it doesn't get the acknowledgement back, it'll just run something to block the content on the page. Just. Mhm. That's true too. Yeah, sometimes they'll have all the content already on the page, but then their script if you stop it just before it's done loading its script, you'll get to see everything that's up on there. Sometimes too, you can even in the developer console, you can actually go and unhide that little blocking thing too by doing either changing activating or deactivating a style or running some sort of JavaScript function command in the console there. So I'm glad everybody liked that. And then one thing too, I'm sorry I didn't point out, was how to do that on a PC. Was it that much different to bring it up on a PC versus the Mac from the class? Everyone didn't have issues, right, bringing it up? Okay, good. Okay. So today, like I said earlier in the Slack discussion, if you haven't already, just sign up for a CodePen.io account, just so we can do some assignments or some in-class examples. And then I think too, for this week's homeworks, you actually have to submit a CodePen URL to complete the assignment. So it's good to get a leg up on that now. And then we'll just go over some stuff today. So from last week, we went over just some basic networking concepts, client-server architecture, an overview of the HTTP protocol, request, response, some status codes that you get from it, and Chrome Developer Tools. Does anyone have any questions about last week's lecture content? I know I posted it up on YouTube. There's this massive echo, I think, in the audio. I try to lower the mic this week on here. Hopefully it works a little better. If not, I think maybe next time I'll just try the actual computer microphone and see if it works a little better. It was still good. They got the job done. Oh, good. Yeah, it's good. I know a lot of people are out from the flu. Flu's been going around and just destroying people. It's very important to get that flu shot, to help. It doesn't always protect you, but it gets it most of the time. Okay. So if we don't have anything for last week, I guess we'll get started. So this week we're going to be talking about HTML. HTML is essentially the content of your web page. I have an example here. If you had a blog, the HTML would describe different sections of your blog page. For example, you'd probably have a div tag saying, these are blogs, and within that div, you would have. Now, does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say div tag? Does anybody know what HTML tags are? Tags, attributes? You do? What's?
Is it when you search something those big words and keywords in the article so they can come up?
It's part of it. It'll actually be defined in certain sections of the page, which we'll go over in like 2 seconds. So yeah, when you want to have a web page have those keywords to be picked up by search engines, that's usually, you put that in the meta tag, which I think is like the next slide here. But yeah, essentially the tags, they contain the content of your web page. Think of it like that. So tags, they usually start with the open bracket, open close bracket, and then the slash. So you have here you have, so it'll start, you have tag name and then closing tag, or sometimes you have just the one tag encompassing, both opening and closing tags. Tags could be nested. So for example, an HTML document, you'll start with the HTML tag, and then within that HTML tag, you'll have a meta tag, you'll have a head tag, which then can contain meta tags. Those meta tags also have siblings. They could have links. They can have link tags, script tags, etc. And normally tags, when we talk about the content, in your content, you usually have, you start with the most general tag and then become more descriptive as you go within nesting of your tags. And it's important to remember that your HTML code is going to be structural definition of the page. It doesn't necessarily describe the style of your page, which would be the different fonts you'd use in your text, colors, background images, background colors, positioning. That's normally handled by what are called cascading style sheets, CSS style sheets. And but HTML does have a way where you can force a style into a tag by using what's called the style attribute. How many people have heard of the style attribute for HTML tags? You have? Is it good to use the style attribute? It can be. When would you normally use a style attribute? Mm-hmm. Okay. Normally you want to avoid using the style attribute, and you'll see the reason why later when we get into cascading style sheets. It usually people use the style attribute to like force something onto a specific element on the page. Like they can't figure out how to get this thing positioned just right. There's something that's what you'll see with styles is styles can override each other. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a question?
No, I was just going to say from personal experience with HTML.
Uh-huh.
I've only ever used the style tag if there was one element that I just wanted to change, like one, like say I just wanted to change this one, or just like one element.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to go into CSS and make an ID for it and put it in CSS because that's just taking up more time and it's just easier. But generally speaking,
that's true too. Yeah.
Give like a class or an ID or something.
That's another good example. Yeah. Sometimes too, instead of modifying the style sheet to go and match your HTML document, sometimes you'll just throw the style right into the attribute. But for all intents and purposes, and I'm guilty of it too. I do the same thing. I'll embed styles into HTML attributes at my job sometimes just to get it going. But best practice is normally you want to separation of concerns. You want to have your HTML be the structure of your page, and your CSS be your stylings. And the reason why would you want to do that? What would be a reason for doing that? Why would you want to separate your structure from your style, like from the way that the page is going to look? Well, what about themes? You ever see themes on a website, right? One example you can have is, if you wanted a website that you can have different themes, have the site appear with different themes on it, instead of redoing the whole, having a separate page for every single theme that you have. You can have what are called, you can have CSS styles, and then depending on the theme the user selects, you would just load in a different CSS file versus reloading the whole HTML document. And we'll get into all that later on in the class. This is an example. This is pretty much a bare bones HTML document right here. Normally the first thing they start with is this doc type tag here, which I didn't go over. That's usually that's there for readers to go, for parsers to recognize that this is an HTML document. It's almost like if you know XML has these like specific formatting standards, and that's just one of the things that HTML adopted was this new doc type tag that starts. It pretty much just says, hey, I'm an HTML document. And then if you look down, you then have an HTML tag. And then within that HTML tag, you have a head tag, and then a body tag. And then within the head tag, you have these different meta tags. And then within the body, you have your content, which is, in this case, is the paragraph tag here, the hello world. For the keyword thing we were just talking about before, normally you would put that in the meta tag. You would have a section, I don't have it here, specifying keywords, and usually that would show up in the head tag here, and the search engine, crawler bots that go out there. That's usually the first thing they'll look at is the head tag to see what keywords the web page has on it, and then puts it into their database, and then further, I'm sure there's further analysis that goes on beyond that. But in this case here, in the meta tag, first of all, the head tag, I want to point out, is usually stuff that will not be displayed on the page. The head tag usually contains elements in here that are used for loading the page up, to give certain, best way to describe it, give certain properties to the browser to know, what it's looking at. So like, for example, here, it's saying the character set is going to be UTF-8, which is important to know, because if you have, say, a UTF-16 character set, and when the browser tries to parse this, it's going to come up with errors, because UTF-8 is not compatible with UTF-16 because it's a bigger character set, or byte set there. Also in this example, we have the viewport, which defines the width of the content. So in this case, it's just the width of the device, and then you can apply a scale here. Usually use this with smartphones. Usually have this for doing dynamic. When you usually go and like flip the phone around, does dynamic scaling for you. And then this last one here, usually use this a lot with Internet Explorer here. I've used this a lot when I worked at the County of Monmouth. You can actually specify, some browsers have special meta tags you can put in to have it do different things. So for example, Internet Explorer, there's this XUA compatible tag you can add to your attribute you can add to your meta tag. And in here it's specifying, it's saying to use the Edge rendering engine for Internet Explorer. So when Internet Explorer goes and reads this page and and sees that meta tag, it's going to know, hey, I need to use the latest. I think Edge is like the latest rendering engine. You can also have it. You can also specify, I think, like IE10, IE11. If you had script on the page that you knew only worked within a certain rendering context, and that's pretty much just some inside baseball there on what that does. Most like Firefox and other browsers, they'll usually just ignore something like that there. Any questions so far? Yep, go ahead.
The title thing document, is that going to like show title at the top of the page, or is that
So the title, that's a good point. So the title tag there, it's actually going to show not at the it's going to show in the window title. So it'd be like the actual. I don't know if like Mac has this. Let's see here if I go and does it not? No. Maybe the tab itself. Yeah. If I were to, I don't know how I do that here. If I were to have another tab, yeah. So right there, CodePen dashboard. Yeah. So it'd be in Mac. In Windows, it'll actually show up too at the. There's like a little title thing at the top, the title bar for the window. So yeah, the title, it doesn't necessarily show on the page, but it does show in the, like I said, somewhere in the OS's like GUI window essentially. And I think if this was on like an iOS device or an Android device, yeah, I think the same thing happens. It'll be the actual tab name in that case. But yeah, very good point. Thank you for pointing that out. Any other questions? Did that answer your question, the title?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So now let's talk about the meta tag. So the meta tags that we have is the HTML, which encompasses your entire document. You have the head tag, which we just talked about before, is going to be pretty much the area that loads different, gives different properties for the page, and also will be used to load different elements. So, talked about the meta. Meta can provide character encoding, page size, browser-specific options. You have the link tag. The link tag defines a link between the HTML document and an external resource. Normally, it's going to be to a cascading style sheet, CSS style sheet. Now, it's also important to note that the order that these are put in actually matter as well, which we'll probably talk about more when we get into CSS. So, for example, if you had two style sheets and you defined the link tags at the top of the, in the meta element, I believe it loads. I noticed it's from bottom up, so it's usually. I'm gonna have to do some research again on this. Usually what happens is it'll go bottom up, and the top one, I believe, takes precedence over the bottom elements. I believe too it might depend too on the browser. Might be browser specific, but yeah, that's the link tag. You also have script tags, which define. You can either define an external JavaScript file, or you can actually have opening and closing script tag in the file, and have actual JavaScript code embedded in the page. And then when the page loads, it will go and execute that JavaScript code as the page loads up. And then you have your body, and your body is pretty much where all of your content resides. And what will be displayed on the page ultimately. So you have different types of markup. So you have structural markup. Structural markup is normally it defines areas of your page. So for example, H1, H2, all the way down to H6 tags are usually, or headers or titles in the document. H1 is the most important one, and it's usually also another indicator for search engines to catalog the H1 header. So it's also important that your keyword stuff, the H1 describes the page accurately. The P tag denotes a standalone paragraph. You have divs. Divs are essentially a division of content in your page. You can have divs within divs, and usually you will see in some examples later on, you use them to group objects together. You also have lists. You have unordered lists, which normally show up as bullet points. Then, of course, you have ordered lists, which will show up as numbers. And then you also have LI, which is a list item or a list element. And those are usually found within the ULs or OLs of the You can also have lists within lists, as an aside. So don't just think, too, that, you have to have a UL and then list item, list item, list item. You can have UL and then a list item that's a list within a list, and then so on, because of the nesting that you're allowed to do with an HTML document. So here's an example here. So here we have this is the body tag, and if we're continuing from the last example, so within the body tag we defined a header, and then an ordered list, which is our favorite social media sites. We have Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. So here's a good in-class exercise. So in your CodePen, create a new page that has a title, an unordered list of things you look for in a car, and then create an ordered list of your favorite cars, and then give each list a title. And I'll bring up should have had it both together, I guess, what we have here. Just give you a minute. So was, create a new page that has a title, unordered list of things you look for in a car, an ordered list of your favorite cars, and then give each list a title. And then, yeah, I was just gonna have us just go through it. So you can go ahead and just shout out. So what would I do first here? The first thing what's the first tag I'm putting in? HTML. Very good. I think in CodePed, technically, if you were doing this in a text editor, yeah, you would do the doc type. What is that? Doc type. But I believe in CodePen, if you look, it actually hits you with, you don't need it in CodePen. But yeah, if you were doing this like as a separate HTML file or a server-side script file, yeah, you would have the doc type up top. Very good. But in this case, yeah, we'll start out with the HTML tag. What's that? This is all within the body? It's funny, with CodePen, yeah, you can just define it, you can just say like body and then put your content type, your content in there. I think in this case we'll pretend we're going bare bones here. So we'll say we require the HTML element. So then what's next? What's after HTML? I need the head. Yep, the head tag. We do the head. The H. Because if you want two different lists, yeah. And then two different titles, could you do like H1, H2, and then a title for each one, and then? Well, no, the title is only for the document itself. The title's in the head. So if we wanted the. So if you're only doing one head, you could just do that. If you're doing two, you could do H1 and H2. So in this case, yep. So yeah, that's when we get to the body of it. So in this case, in the title, I'm just going to put something like my favorite cars, right? And that's what we were saying before with depending on the operating system or the browser you're using, it's either going to be that title we see here will either be displayed in the at the top of the window, like the actual GUI window, or as a separate tag. And then next, I think what we're getting to before would be the body. So now we're going to get into the actual content here. Body, and then what? What would your title each list? No. What was the last one? So it was, bless you. So it was, yeah, so we just needed the one title, and then we need an unordered list of things you look for in a car. Okay. So since you did my favorite cars, you want me to order list, right? Or you do it. So we would do, and then we have to give each one I guess this is misleading. Should be, yeah, because I'm using title twice here. But it was, bless you. What you were saying before with so if I wanted to give this list a title, right, what would I put for the tag here? This is the title for the page. So we have a title, so there'd be three titles, right? We would have a title for the page, and then a title for each list, right? So now would you redo H1, H2? Mm-hmm. So we can do, believe we would do technically H2. You should really only have, honestly, you could put H1, H1 if you wanted to, but I believe the way the search bots work, they're looking really for, the H1's it's really looking for one H1 on the page. and that's gonna be like, you know, you'd probably have like an H1 saying, like, my favorite cars, right? Because that was, so if we wanted to, we can do that. If we wanted to also have an H1, we could do something like this here. H1, my favorite cars, right? Then we'll have H2, and then say list of things I look for in a car. Right? Then what do I do? Mm-hmm. Well, no, because it would be after it. So in this case, what did we say? An ordered list, unordered list. So an unordered list would be UL.
But I guess what I'm saying is, how does it know which list goes under which?
It doesn't. Technically, when you're writing HTML code, it doesn't really know that, you know, H2 is associated with this list, right? Or that it's associated with this div. It's just this is a sibling. If you're looking at the structure of this document here, so like, we have right now, we have an HTML tag that then has two children, right? Head and body, and then within the body we have H1, H2. You can only have one body for the whole document. So like,
How do you specifically make things under
So it's going to be displayed, now that we're within the body, it's going to be, as we're putting the tags in, it's going to go by the order that the tags are within the body. So for example, H1 will be above H2, and then it just, however we're typing out the tags, that's how it's going to flow down on the page. Mhm. Yeah, so that's what. So we'll make that, and then So then what we'll do is, so we'll do this ahead of time here. So we'll make another H2. We'll say my favorite cars. Right now, this really should be, what was it? Things I look for in a car? Is that what I said? No, I don't know. Say example. And then we'll have our ordered list. Yep, so we have two H2s within our body. And let's just, I guess,
Is 2 the number, or is it just a priority?
It's
Is it a way to rate the priority, or a way of...
Yes, it's like it goes from 1 being highest priority to, going for, the precedence. Yeah, I think.
So it's not the number header, it's just the priority of the header.
Mhm. And usually too, the size will be changed too. So for example, if I had a H6, right, H6, right, you can see too, look how small it is. but yep, it's still bold, and yeah, it still has, it's still technically a header, yeah. It's, so that, think of it that way too, yeah, if you were to have like sections, on your page, sections, and then you have a subsection, right? So if we had a subsection here for, list of things, yeah, we'd probably go H3 and then have the header, and then so on. Does that make sense? Yeah. Essentially, you think of it that way. But, yeah. And then technically, too, technically you can even change the font size when we get into CSS. You can change the H1, the H2s to whatever font size you want. You can technically declare H2 font size to be larger than H1's font size, which isn't good practice because normally, like I said, normally when a search bot or someone goes to view your page, particularly the search bots, a lot of people, they really just care about search bots now. They want to be the number one hit on Google, right? So normally you want to have good form, and good form would be having your H1 be having only one H1, and having it where it's essentially the content of the page, or the essentially be your title, I guess, of the page there. Does that make sense to everyone? In terms of, and then there's more. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yep. So it's going to go by the. So we didn't have a meta. I think there's a. I should have included this in our slides. There's a meta tag you can put in for keywords. So in the meta, so let's say we had a meta, and then keywords equals cars, trucks, etc. In the header, no. Well, for the key, I think at some point, I'm sure there's no limit for how many keywords you can have. I'm sure if you try to put well, then it goes back to the size of the file. If you try to put millions of keywords in on the page, at some point, the search bot will probably just be like, okay, this is nonsensical, and just not even index the page. Normally, with the keywords, it's probably going to only look for, I don't know, I can't say an exact number. Let's say the first 5, and then that's it. It probably won't go beyond that. So when you have your keywords, I have to look up to. I'm not 100% on. This is it. Let me just do a quick Google search here. Keywords. The old W3 schools. I'm sorry, keywords and then content. So that's how. So we were missing, I'm sorry, so it'd be, what was that? Name keywords and then content. I'll just copy this here. Paste in there, and so it would look something like this here. See if I can blow this out here. Let's get these out on the side here. Yeah, and then you would do your. Yeah, sorry, I didn't have my coffee tonight. Cars, trucks, etc. Right. Yeah, so it would go. So that I think the precedent, and then usually this would be above the title too. Try not to go too nuts with form here, but so it would normally look something like this. You'd have your meta, go by the meta, and then the title, and then into the actual body, and then looking for that H1 header, and then that's pretty much, I'm sure there's more analysis that goes on, but that's usually, the top things. That's usually the first place it's gonna go. So it's important, to have that defined. If you're particularly concerned with your page being picked up in, in a search engine, that's usually the first three things you want to have for your HTML document. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Uh-huh.
Is there any way we could get our list to like go in columns, or is it strictly?
Yep. So we'll get to that when we do our styling. But you can get it to where you have it move into certain columns and whatnot. We'll dive into that more when we get into CSS. Any other questions? Uh-huh. Technically, no. Technically, you could have it all be on one line. Normally, I like to put the indentation in. I think most text editors that you use will put the indentation in and do some syntax highlighting just so it's easier for you to read. Because once the document gets fairly large, I mean, look at where we're at now. I mean, we're down to almost 20 lines, and just to navigate and see, what's within what. And then you'll see too when we get into when we do style sheets, that's going to be important too when we get into our specificity of our elements when we go to apply certain like styles to it. Like we want paragraph elements that are within the div tag with the ID of blog post to have this type of font, right? It's easier to just quickly find things when you have the indentation like that. If that makes sense. Okay. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, how do you write a comment? Like I know in like Java.
So we're going to get to that. That's in a later slide. Question? So I'm glad you brought this up. I wanted to bring this up at some point. For years, people, it's very important in HTML. HTML defines the structure of your page. It shouldn't dictate positioning. A lot of people will sometimes to get, like, say, I want this portion of my page to, go here and then have it go in the middle, and then to do your, like, say, your column thing. The people will sometimes create a table and then have within the table rows and then place the elements within there. The problem with that is, so when you get into like, say you want your site to work on not just, a desktop, browser, you want it to work on like, say, a smartphone or essentially anything that has a variable resolution. Because, for example, when, we're looking at this page right now at, I don't know, I think it's like 720p, which is what, I forget the exact resolution that is. It's probably, 720 by, I don't know. Does anybody know? By 14 something, I think, right? Was that 1260? I think that sounds about right. But what can happen is, you have your table defined, and usually when you do that, you have to define a certain width on each of the columns. So, like, say you define your width to be, 30, pixels, right? When that page is viewed on, say, something different from the resolution that you're viewing the page on, it could essentially either shrink or expand depending on the, like I said, the resolution of the device that you're using. You can't. Yes, the answer is you could do that. You could have a table, define in the table. Say usually when you use tables, you're using tables to display some sort of tabular, like, data set, like, say, like you know, you're showing something you'd show like in an Excel spreadsheet, like numbers, you know, this is what we generated for this quarter in, you know, I don't know, whatever you're selling, right? Some sort of tabular data that you're trying to present. It's not recommended to use tables for formatting. You want to use style sheets. You want to use, and you can do that with. Used to not be able to do that, you know, in earlier HTML specs, but now with I think since HTML4, you can have things just, you know, you can just say, you know, I want this to be positioned on the left side. I want it to be positioned here, and so on. And you can even use like CSS frameworks to do that. You have things like Bootstrap. You have Foundation, and I think what was one my friend was showing me? Bulma, bless you. Bulma is another good one where you can have your, you know, define your columns, and then it not matter when you move to say another, because what will happen is when you move to a smaller device, those columns will stack up, and then you can go and like, you know, essentially scroll down the page. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
So pretty much just when you use CSS, it's like proportionate.
Yep. And then, yeah, when we get into like media queries and stuff, yeah, you'll see how too. Yeah, you can define specific layouts. So if you want to like say like a layout where you have a left sidebar and then content on the right, right, and then what happens is, you know, when the page shrinks, right, gets to a certain size. At a certain size, that left sidebar is going to overtake the rest of the, you know, most of the page. So then what it does is you can have it where you define it to say, once it gets to a certain width, move this sidebar out, place it up top, make it a like a what do you call it? Like a drop-down type of box. I forget what they're called now. But you can have it essentially change, yeah, the layout based on the device that you're using, or or of the resolution of the device that you're using. If that makes sense. Good. Okay. Sorry for going on a rant like that. It's just, I feel like it's very important to like you said, it's back to that separation of concerns. You want to have your HTML be your structure, and your CSS to define your positioning and how things should look and whatnot. So back to this example here. So we'll just quickly put in. So if we have our list, and then with our list, let's say we have like a list element, right, which is an LI. Take this out. So UL is an unordered list, and then OL is an ordered list. So you can see, let me just try to bring this up here, the bottom here, because yeah, as we type, it'll actually update on the bottom here. So what type of things do we look for in a car? Yeah. I guess, yeah, that's true. It's really for formatting. It's like so let's put in what's someone's favorite car here? How do you spell that? DOLDELORAN. Was it RDELOR? What was that? IN? Was that? Oh, EAN. There we go. What was another one? What was it? I'm sorry. How do you spell that? Yeah. Like that? Yeah. There we go. Close enough. It's not a spelling class. So you can see at the bottom here, see how now you're getting numbers, right, added on. I mean, honestly, the difference is this is going to be, it's not going to tell your users, it's not going to give numbers next to the items in the list, whereas the ordered list will give, you can have it also do something like A, B, C. You can have it do subsets. If you were to do, like, say you were trying to display like a legal document, you'd probably use the ordered list to just have it go, say, you had some sort of docket saved in a database system. You work for a courthouse, and there was, like, say, evidence, right? You have, like, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit A, subset, 1 or something, right? You would probably use the ordered list to denote that. And then, so, like, if we were to go here, we do, let's say, another list, right? And we do /li. And within here, we put in another OL. And then LI. I'll say Mustang, right? And so in this case, you have the numbering continued on. I guess we'd have to do the other thing too is you can apply styles to these. I think normally when you do this, you'd have some sort of stylings included. Let's put a paragraph within here. No, that didn't help at all. Or do I need? I don't need the LI. I take the LI out. Yeah, there it goes. So if I take the LI out, you can see it restarted the numbering. And then when we get to style sheets, what you can do is there's properties that you can set where if you had list within list, instead of it's restarting at say 1, you could have it start at say like an alphanumeric. So like you can have be A instead of so you can have 2A, B, C, D, and so on. Whereas the unordered list, I believe you don't have that. You probably have it where you'd still have list within lists, but it would be you would have like say the little circle bullet, then probably a dash. You can have it be where a sub list is represented with a dash and then indented, and so on. Does that answer? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this? No. Okay. I think we're good with this example. Move on here. I don't know why this is no longer. Can't get it to play full screen now. What if I try to restart this here? Oh. The old force quit. Uh-huh.
Start a new line with the tag, right?
Was that? Yeah. So depends on the tag itself. So for paragraph, for example, paragraph will put a line break in. You can also put in what's a line break using the BR tag. So, like for example, up here, let's see here. Like if I wanted to add in another line break, I can do BR/, and then that should put in a additional line break on the page. You just go put in a bunch if you wanted to. But yeah, like so, but depends on the tag itself. So I think divs don't. I don't believe divs put in a line break. Spans do not put in a line break. And some, we'll get to this in a moment. Some of the presentational ones don't do the line break either. Let's play from here. There we go. Did we do this one? Probably did. Yeah. Just skip through. So that's the next thing. So with the line breaks, some tags, presentational tags, particularly don't. Some of them don't do the line break. So, for example, if you had a strong tag, strong will bold the font text in the page. Or if you have an EM will italicize it. And then you can also have span tags, which kind of separate out the content in the page with the it's just another form of a div tag, essentially. So yeah, like if we were in this example again, if we go back, let's do it to like say speed, or say I put a paragraph in the bottom. Do paragraph. We say this class is putting the strong tag in. Awesome. All right. And of course I spelled it wrong. And then if we look here, yeah, so it didn't put a line break in necessarily. It just in this case it just put a bold font on the text that is within the strong tag. The other thing I wanted to make note about is some of these presentational type of tags are deprecated since HTML4. When the actual CSS styling came out, it's preferred now to use the actual style attributes versus using the old, because I think too you also have I think like the I tag, you have the B tag, which is bold. Those are no longer considered good form to use because they've been deprecated since the new HTML standard. Anybody have any questions about presentational tags? No. This is the example we just did. So this one here, it has it in a sentence. So you have both the strong and the emphasis. That's what EM stands for, the emphasis tag. You also have void tags, which I think I talked about a little bit before. And normally these types of tags, they're either the closing tag is optional or there's just no closing tag. So for example, like the input and the image tag, they're not going to have a closing input or a closing image. They're just going to have just the shorthand / greater than sign for closing it. And then the way that these get used is they have something called attributes, which we'll get to. And then here's that question with the comments. Sorry it took so long to get here. So for putting a comment in, it's just the, what is that, the less than sign, exclamation point, dash, dash, and then whatever your comment is, and then dash, dash, greater than sign is how you would put a HTML comment into your document. Comments are good just to give, just to make some sort of sense out of badness, But yeah, and then also it doesn't have to be on a single line. It can actually span multiple lines. You can even use it to comment out HTML code if you're testing it. So for example, if we go back to here, if we wanted it to say comment out, just this whole list tag here, we can just do boom, boom, scroll down. All right. That's why too we do the indentation so we can see it a little better. And then we just comment it out, that whole section there. So that's comments, and then attributes. So that's another big thing is HTML attributes are very important. They provide additional metadata in order to have the tag function properly. So for example, like an input tag, let's say we were to put an input tag on this page here, right? Say we put it right after this class is awesome, right? We put a input at the bottom there. So there's our input tag. You can specify, so for example, I believe there's a type attribute. We say the type is checkbox. Look what happened. Went from becoming a text box that you type into, now it's a little check you can put onto the page there. And the other other HTML tags have attributes that you can set custom behavior to, in addition to just the input tag. So if we go back, I think for example, the way you set attributes is they're by name value pairs, separated by the equal sign. The image tag, for example, to define, say, the source, to define the location of the image that you want to display on the web page, you have to specify the source attribute. So for example here, if you wanted to display this little puppy, you'd have an image tag with that URL put in there, and then that would be that would show up on the page. And then just to show that, oh, I can't, but take my word for it. That's what. So for nesting, I think we talked about this before. Nesting you do to group content together, form a concept or idea. For example, if you're creating a blog post, you probably want to group together individual blog posts into one section. Say you have the master, the blog post list, and then within that blog post list you have your individual blog posts. And then, so I have an example pen here showing that. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. So here you can see I have my HTML, the head, title of the page, and then I have a blog post 1. Well, I have a div. It's hard to see right away, but after my body, I have this div tag, and then within my div, I'll have my individual blog post. So there's blog post 1. And then if I scroll down, There's blog post 2, and I think too you can actually do a little folding here so you can see, do the old code folding up here. So I have 2 divs that separate out my 2 different blog posts. And then you'll see later on it helps to organize stuff in that manner, just so that when you get to actually styling the page, it becomes easier for you to go ahead and apply your different styles to your sections that you're looking to edit at the time. Another important attribute is the class attribute. Previous groupings we had were useful, but like we saw when we initially went to the page, it's hard to tell what exactly you're looking at. So you have the class attribute will help you, lets you assign class names to HTML tags within your document. All tags that are, including the body, all tags that are that can be children of the body, and also the body tag can have a class attribute assigned to it. You wouldn't assign class attributes to stuff that's in the head or the meta tags. It's only for presentation you would use them for. And then you want to assign these class names so that later on, when you do use your CSS, you can use it to apply different styles and formatting to your page. So, for example, here we have a div with a class picture group, and then within that div, you have individual image tags within it. And then what that lets us do is we can, later on, when we get into CSS and selectors, you're able to go and actually apply different, say I want everything within this picture group to be, every image tag within the picture group to be, say, a certain, width and height. It's easy to do because now you have that class defined for your div tag. Any questions on that? I'm sorry if I'm going a little fast here. Any questions on class, the class attribute, class names, nesting? Okay. You also have the ID attribute. ID, so classes should be used multiple times throughout your page for similar content, whereas the ID attribute should be unique. There shouldn't be more than one ID value found. It doesn't matter if it's nested or not. All IDs assigned to tags within your HTML document should be unique. And usually you use the ID attribute when you're doing both your CSS selectors, but particularly when you do JavaScript coding. It's usually a lot easier to say, to give something an ID on the page so that you can then go and easily pick it out when you're, I guess whether you're running, specific script code or doing some sort of CSS, formatting on the page. Sometimes it's useful to have a unique ID attribute to go to. So that's it's going to be a unique element there. And then I have a mistake on the slide here. I don't know if anyone sees it, but this really should say ID. I apologize for that. So it would look something like that there. Normally, too, for sometimes, you know, when these pages are generated, you may not be necessarily entering in the IDs. This might be actually created via server-side code to, say it was like, you know, you have a database and, you know, you have an ID column, which is your primary key. Might be something like that that's embedded into the page for you to easily access unique content or unique rows or data, let's say, and then do some sort of, you know, thing on the page, you know. For example, like say these were check boxes here. You can, in JavaScript, you can go and have some sort of event handler that would go, and when that was checked, it would take the ID and send that, you know, save that in a list, you know, say an array or something. And then when you go to post, we talked about last week, when you go to send to the server, you post your array of IDs that you had checked off, you know, on the page to be sent to the server and to, I don't know, say delete. Say you were looking to delete them or something, have it do something like that. So IDs are useful. So what we got left? I guess we got 10 minutes. So this is the last in-class exercise. So if you go to this URL here, I guess we'll just do it together. We want to give appropriate class names to all the H1, P, and div tags, and then give blog post IDs in this CodePen example that I have. We don't have much time left, so we'll just do this together here. So here's that blog post that I had. What sections do you think I should give class names to? To the divs, right? So the easiest way we can find this, we can do the code folding, right? So if we fold the code, we see we have two blog posts. These are the two divs for our blog posts. So I can give a class name. We say class equals blog post. Now the class names, you can't have spaces in it. I forgot to point that out when going over that section before. The reason being is because you can actually assign, when we get to CSS next week, multiple class names to a tag, and what that will do is give us, it'll actually inherit, you'll have properties that will be inherited down from there. So if we give this blog post, so we have our two blog posts, class names assigned to it. What else should I do? So we gave blog post class names. If I were to assign the ID for the blog post, this is kind of a trick question, but where would it be assigned at in the structure here? At the H1? Well, it'd be, I guess it would be the div, right? It would be, so you can have multiple attributes, right? So in this case, we'll say ID blog post 1, or we can just say 1. Most of the time, might actually even be a number sometimes. It can really be, as long as it's unique, the ID can be really anything. As as long as it doesn't conflict with another ID. All right. And we also give class names to the H1 and the P. So to do that, this is kind of redundant because what you'll see later is when you go to define your CSS, you can actually, when we get into specificity next week, you can actually say, tags with this class name, and then within that, say all P tags have this type of styling. It's kind of redundant, but I think you get the idea. You would just, for this here, we'll just say class equals blog title. And you would do the same for the other ones. Is there any questions? Anything we went over today? No, that's pretty much all I had. Next week, I won't be here. I'm actually going to be out of town. So what I was going to do for next week, instead of holding class in session, I was just going to make a video online for you guys to watch. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah? Okay. So no class next week. I'll post an announcement. I'll have a YouTube video up going over CSS and everything. Did you have a question? Oh, no. What was it for? Uh-huh. Oh, bless you. So you didn't have any, what was that?
Oh, so after you submit, I submitted text, and it's not submitted, you didn't answer yet, and then, afterwards, this is, getting comments.
Bless you.
You can pass it to the comment.
Oh, okay. I didn't even realize, so it's like you can't attach anything? It's like oh, okay. That's fine. Yeah, so you just copy and paste. That's fine. Yeah, don't worry about, the formatting. Yeah, not asking for APA, whatever. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, so just if you submitted it via the text box or an attachment, I threw the 12-point font just to give you an idea of how much content I was necessarily looking for. But thank you. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Yep. But if there's no other questions, that was about all I had for today. I'll post up an announcement on both Canvas, Slack, on next week's video. Yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to email or message me on the Slack. All right. Cool. Thank you, everyone.